how did you decide before you even declared to be a performance major? What were you thinking as far as your career, your future, and why did you decide to be a performance major in the first place?
Mhm. Well, I wanted to be a performance major because I wanted to play in orchestras. Um, I made that decision when I was in high school and I was playing with the Chicago Youth Symphony. And I remember playing an orchestra hall in downtown Chicago, and how absolutely cool that was. And I loved the music. And I I had always wanted to be an engineer, but then I realized I was looking at schools, looking at like, okay, well, you have a decent engineering program, but do you have like a music program I could be part of as well? And suddenly realized that I cared more about the music program than I did about the engineering program. So maybe I should um, consider just going into music, and that's what I did. Um, so yeah, on that front, I think I was pretty successful. I get to spend my time, a good portion of my time, playing in different orchestras.
And would you say, in your experience, for most musicians who are going into a performance major, that's kind of what they want to do? They want to play in an orchestra.
Right. And I mean, I can't sugarcoat it. It's hard. It's even hard for the regional orchestras, because I know I see young students all the time. They come in to like buy horns, and a lot of times talk about career paths and things like that. And I know a lot of people are like, well, well, I should be able to play in regional orchestras, as well. But like, I just took an audition for the Midland Odessa Symphony Orchestra. You've probably never even heard of it. It's not a very big city in Texas. And you even go to that audition and there are 40 people there. So it everything you do is competitive. So no matter what your goal is in performance, like you have to practice. You have to practice like you're trying to get into the Chicago Symphony to do anything really, just because there aren't that many spots open for anything.
And you've had a lot of experience really since even while you were in school auditioning for orchestras and different places all over the US. But
Mhm.
after you got your degree, you decided to move to Dallas, Texas. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did. And I moved immediately after graduation. Um, it turned out to be a great decision eventually. I did it because one of my office mates had moved to Texas the year before. I don't know if you remember Chad Dago, um, but he had moved to Texas the year before, and he had found lots and lots of students. And I was living in Phoenix, and I realized, hey, I can't keep living here unless I find a way to make a living. And in this city, that's going to basically be getting a 9 to 5 job. And I knew that wasn't going to be very compatible with taking auditions and playing, because you only, at the most generous jobs, you only get 2 weeks off a year. Now that's not really going to cut it if you want to take auditions and play in regional orchestras and things like that. So I decided to move to Texas to become a private teacher and pick up as many students as I could. And I was able to do that. I moved to Texas. My first year here, I had 50 students. My second year here, I had 60 students. Half-hour lessons, so not 60 hours a week, but still quite busy. Um, that turned out that that works out for some people, but if you're thinking of doing that, because you know you find there are a lot of people who move to Texas every single year for that same purpose, because there's more than enough students for everybody down here.
Dr. Wright, is that because the music or the band system, I guess, in for public schools in Texas, especially in Dallas, the band directors require the students to take lessons? Why are there so many opportunities for lessons there?
Well, they actually can't require the students to take lessons, but they're highly, highly encouraged. And it's just a different band culture here. Band is a big deal. Like if you're in band in high school, it's a big deal. Like that's your extracurricular activity. And the bands are very large. I mean, there are a couple high schools here that have marching bands with 800 plus people. There are high schools with 50 horn players. So there are just so many kids here that there, you know, there are more students than there are teachers.
I'm
But
curious also, Dr. Wright, um, what your mindset or your feelings were about what you were doing first going into Dallas and gaining those 50 students the first year compared to 2 years later after you had finished your second year teaching that amount of students every single week, which I imagine would be really exhausting.
yeah, it was very exhausting. It did not lend itself very well to freelancing at the same time. I was not able to bring my best self to my gigs. And frankly, that hurt me for quite a few years as far as playing in the DFW area because tend you really only get one chance to not mess up. And it's very because the freelance scene is so tight and so competitive. Messing up doesn't mean you have to mess up big. And I was so tired and exhausted after doing so much teaching. I wasn't really able to do that. There are a few other things that you don't think about, but like playing with students every day really pushed my pitch up because most young students play sharp, and then you play with the students because the band directors want you to play with the students, and then you suddenly find that you're playing at the top side of all of the notes, and you've been pushed up. Things like that don't help. And I also found it pretty hard when I wanted to take auditions and take trips to play in other orchestras. I had to cancel and move around lessons. And that's a great way to lose students if you do that a lot, especially if you don't have any cachet. Like, if you're playing in a Dallas Symphony or playing in a Fort Worth Symphony and you're like, you know, a big deal, then, students are willing to, do all that. And they're like, oh, you're busy. It's fine. No, yeah. But, if you're just like, random teacher, they're like, why are you moving around lessons so much? You shouldn't be doing that. So after about my second, I taught here for four total. I taught for 4 total years. But after my second year, I had already realized, hey, this is not going to work. It's not helping me to achieve my goals because my goal was always performance. And so that's how I ended up getting involved with Houghton Horns. I emailed Dennis Houghton, who founded the company, and I just said like, "Hey, I'm looking to learn some repair. I'll work for you for free over the summer to learn repair." And he said okay, and it started there. I spent an entire summer working for free, just learning how to do cleanings and things like that.
What is Houghton Horns, and how did you feel like you were going to be a useful service provider, I guess, for Houghton Horns?
Houghton Horns is a retail shop. Retail and repair shop. We specialize in brass instruments, particularly horn and trombone, but we also carry trumpets as well. Um, it was a very it was a very different shop when I started, because when I started, it was mostly repair and some consignment instruments, and we had a couple of dealerships where we were selling a few new horns, but nothing on a large scale as far as retail was concerned. It was mostly a repair shop.
And was this during the time that Mark Houghton was playing principal with the Fort Worth Symphony?
Mark was playing principal with the Fort Worth Symphony, and the retail shop. So the retail and repair business are actually two different businesses. And he was running the retail business out of his home, but it was just a bedroom and a handful of horns.
And did you ever make a connection with Mark Houghton during your freelancing gigs?
Yeah, I did because mainly because when I wanted to become a freelancer, I just emailed people and asked if I could play for them. Now, if you do that, it's you got to accept the fact that most people are going to say no, but that doesn't mean that they're hostile to you. People really lack time. Some are, are willing to make the time and will listen to you. You got to ask for a lesson though, and you got to pay. Like, don't expect to go play for someone for free. Like, that's not, and it's kind of rude when you do that as well, because that's just one little tip, because no one says that out front. But yeah, if you're asking to play for local freelancers, contractors, principals of the orchestras, things like that, you know, you're basically asking for a lesson, and you should be prepared to pay. Um, so yeah, I had a few lessons with Mark trying to get into the freelance scene.
So you emailed Howden Horns. You started offering work for free so that you could learn repair services. And was that because in your mind you were hoping to shift away from teaching lessons and doing more repair work? Was
Well,
that?
what I was thinking was that there wasn't much gigging to do in the summertime. So summer is just pretty dead, because the orchestra seasons, all of the regional orchestras are off during the summer. So there isn't much work during the summer, and there isn't a whole lot of teaching work during the summer as well. So my thought was that if I can start doing cleanings and general repair over the summers, then that would make it so that I could reduce my teaching load during the year. Because basically, I wanted to get it well under 60. Like, I wanted to get it down to like 20 or 25, a more reasonable number. And then that would allow me to more reliably take gigs and freelance and things like that.
So you worked for that summer for free, learning the business basically of instrument repair, and then what happened?
Well, there was circumstances made it so that there was a spot open. So one of the other repair techs, had to take an extended period of time off. And so I was actually hired on, after that summer, to continue to do repair work. And I did that for I did repair work for 2 years total. But that first year I was only doing repair. And then that second year, um, what happened is um, I approached Mark with the idea of building a website for the business, because I just was thinking that the business could be much bigger and much more. So I made an offer, and it was accepted, and so I was paid to build a website. At that time, thinking, I'm going to build this website, and then I'll be done with it. Like, it's not, like, I'm not going to continue with this.
Mhm.
But it just kind of did.
How did you know how to make websites? It seems
Oh,
like you maybe have had a background on that if you were able to put a proposal together and put it forward.
in undergrad, I had a minor well, not an official minor in computer science. I went to the University of Illinois for undergrad, and at the time, they would not allow for minors outside of your college. So I was in the College of Fine Arts, but I was really interested in computers. But you can't get a minor in computer science if you're in the College of Fine Arts. So I spent 5 years there instead of 4, and I just took the classes anyway, because I figured I don't really, who really cares about a piece of paper that says minor anyway. Um, so I took a lot of computer courses there. I also worked for the labs there. So I was a lab sitter for 1 year, but then I got advanced to their technical support. So then I spent the next 4 years working technical support at the University of Illinois. And then when I went to University of Minnesota for my master's, I had a fellowship, which which basically means it's an assistantship, but you don't have to work for it. So I had time to take a job, and then I took another tech support job with the University of Minnesota Extension. So that's where most of my computer experience came from.
And it came into great use in many years later. That's awesome.
I tell people, as far as that's concerned, like if you're interested in something, just pursue it. Like you don't have to be single-minded. You have to be prepared. I mean, this just means you're going to work even harder, because it's not like, you still need to be doing, you know 3 to 5 hours of practice a day. um, and that's never going to stop if you ever have ambitions for being a performer. But that's not 16 hours a day, so you can spend the other time pursuing other interests and other goals, and put them together in different ways.
So you started building this website, and
Mm-hmm.
and eventually it was finished. I mean, I'm assuming. and then what happened after that?
Well, you say you're assuming, but I'm still building the website now. It's never, and that's just, it's never finished. Never. But basically, with the website, sales started picking up, so there was a need for more people, someone to do more sales. So I started doing sales as well. I eventually started doing so many sales that I dropped doing any sort of repair work, because there was just a need to do sales, and things kept growing from there. And then we ended up hiring another salesperson part-time to help me out, and then she eventually became full-time, and then I ended up managing her, and then I ended up doing more with inventory and management and things like that. And then we hired another person, and then we hired another person, and then we hired another person. And then at that point, I approached the other owners of the business, with a proposal to buy in. That took like a year of negotiation, but I eventually did buy in and became an equal partner in the business.
Mhm. As the years went on, you became more and more entrenched in Houghton Horns, the company, to the point where you kind of became indispensable. And eventually, you made the decision to be part owner of the company. What made you make that decision?
Well, frankly, it was just, hey, I realize I've done a lot of work to build this business. I would like to have a more permanent stake in it.
And as far as performance, when you moved to Dallas and you had just received your performance degree, you had a goal of teaching lessons only to basically support yourself so that you can continue taking lessons and eventually get a performance job. Has that goal changed, or your mindset changed from that year, which might have been what, 2008, something like that, 2009, and now 12 years later?
Kind of not, because my goal is still, performance. And Houghton Horns, even though I worked very hard at it, and I would suggest, for any business, you have to go in with a mindset that, like, I'm not only going to make enough money to support myself, I'm going to make it so that it's worth keeping me around. But one of the nice things about this job is that it's really, really, really flexible. I can do my work from anywhere, which means I can take, all of the gigs, performance opportunities that I can. And throughout all of this, I guess what's not been mentioned yet is that if you graduate and you find out that you quote don't cut it, because that's kind of what happened after I left Arizona State. I realized I thought I was better than I really was, because Phoenix was not a very big pond compared to like Dallas. Just because there's so many more players here, there's so much more competition. So like I played with the Phoenix Symphony a few times when I was in Phoenix, and I thought like, hey, that must mean that like I'm doing pretty well. And I got to Dallas and quickly realized, hey, I'm not. Um, and the last 10 years has been, you know, a struggle, constant, I guess it's a lifelong struggle to get better. I realized, hey, at I'm not playing at a level to be competitive. So I started taking lessons with actual lessons with people, not just playing for people lessons. Um, Started spending a lot of time and a lot of resources on, okay, here's where I am. And I think really to improve, that's the first step. You have to have a realistic view of here's where I am. It shouldn't be judgmental. It shouldn't be like hateful or like, really tearing yourself apart. Just a neutral, like, here's where I am. Here's where I need to be. How do I move from here to here? Because now I feel like I've moved a long ways because I'm getting the playing opportunities that I wish I had gotten when I first moved to Texas. But it took a long time and a lot of work, and most people will give up. I've just seen it. So many people move to Dallas every single year to try to like become a teacher and become a freelancer, and you see 2, 3, 4 years in, a lot of people just give up. They'll just continue teaching, but they kind of give up practicing and give up playing portion of it. And I shouldn't be so judgmental about that because families come into the picture and people get older, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna put my energy somewhere else. Mm-hmm. But if you really want to be a performer, it's don't give up. Mm. There's never, if you hear a voice in your head telling you, I'm not good enough, I can never be good enough, I just can't reach the level of this player or that player, understand that it's a lie. There's nothing preventing you from getting there. You just have to figure out how to do it.
And speaking of family, you became a new parent just a couple of years ago or so. And how are you keeping up your practicing with the extra heavy duty time commitment of being a parent?
It makes it so that the practicing is not, I'm able to get in enough time on practicing, but like the ideal of like 4 hours a day separated into 3 or 4 different sessions spread throughout is not possible. I practice from 5:20 in the morning till 8 a.m. And then sometime during the day, I will get in another hour. And I know a lot of people feel like they work better in the evenings, but I find when I have with a family and all that, I'm too exhausted to get good practice in the evenings. Mm-hmm. If I'm practicing in the evenings, I'm just going through the motions. I've got to get up early when I'm fresh and can really do smart practice, not dumb practice where you're just playing for the sake of playing. I would not recommend that. No practice is better than dumb practice. But I did a lot of dumb practice when I first moved to Texas because I was just exhausted from all of these students and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I've been there. Dumb practice. Guilty. What would you suggest to somebody who just received a performance degree?
If you haven't been playing for other people, I would play for other people than your primary teacher, and try to get honest assessments on your playing. And then when you figure out where you are, then you can decide whether, hey, do I need more training? Should I look at grad school? Should I look at should I look at putting together a performance career right now? Because that's always an option as well. You can move to a city, you can get a part-time job that's flexible and can help support your career. You can start up your own business and use that to support your career too, like web design, graphic design, video editing, videography, audio production, a lot of things that are tangential to music. You can do teaching, though I would recommend don't go into teaching unless you want to teach. I feel like a lot of people get the advice that, hey, you should get a music education degree. Hey, you should get, you should teach because, that's what you do. You'll have to teach and perform. But if you don't want to teach, teaching's pretty miserable. If you don't, that doesn't mean that you can't be a performer. It just means that your career is going to look, it's going to look different. Look at your own strengths. Look at what you want to do. Is there any way you can make money with that in conjunction with performance? Um, and yeah, you should take auditions. If for no other reason, taking auditions gives you an excuse and a goal to work towards in your practice. Nothing will keep you on track than trying to, get that, get the rhythm and intonation down well enough to get past the first round. And really, actually, in auditions, when you take enough of them, you find it's actually not that hard to get past the first round in most of them. It really is just good intonation, good rhythm. Good intonation and good rhythm will get you past the first round 80% of the time. My experience in that's not going to be super strong because in Texas, it's different. You just contact band directors and ask, can you teach for them? And then you end up going into different schools and teaching lessons during the day and after school and before school. So aside from emailing band directors and interviewing with them, there's not so much advertisement that needs to be done. I would encourage you, if you're going to go through the private lesson route, read some books on business, because that's a big way that people really kind of mess up private teaching. You need to know how to collect money, and I know that seems like it's super easy, but you do really need some guidance on that, like payment methods, things like that. I would recommend opening up a separate bank account and even making like a little a separate LLC for yourself. It's not that expensive to do. It's not that hard to do, but it's much better for taxes to keep that business separate from your actual income. And just talking to other people, learning how to track people down for payments. You do have to be, hard sometimes because people will not pay, and you have to be strict. I know you're a great student. I love teaching you, but I didn't get payment this week. I can't teach you. I got burned by that too many times, where a student would go a month or two without paying and then suddenly drop lessons, and you're like, I still didn't get like 2 months worth of lesson payments. I guess, I do have one thing. Probably the best way to advertise private lessons these days is social media. You go on Instagram and you go on, well, a lot of Instagram and some on Facebook as well. You see some players trying to make them, market themselves as influencers. They post videos and different fun things that they're doing every single day. That's a great way to get more lessons. But if you're going to go that route, you've got to do it on a regular basis. Like, you can't post one thing, disappear for 3 days, post another thing, disappear for 3 days, post another thing. The most successful ones will post something every day, and they'll do like series, like, today we're going to do this series on like tone production, and then like 10 tips for tone production over like 10 days, or like 10 tips for buzzing over 10 days. Things like that, because a lot of people will tune into that and they'll like, hey, I really want to study with this person. They seem really cool. And it's easy for you to do because you can say, well, there are a lot of people who want to do that, but most people are not going to be consistent. Because doing it once seems like it's easy. Preparing stuff every day and putting time into it, because when you're doing it every day, you're putting time into it, not 10 minutes a day, like a few hours a day, planning it, shooting it, posting it. Most people are not going to do that, so most people are going to fail. But if you can do all of the work, be consistent, and elevate yourself that way, then you won't have a problem getting private students, because people will know who you are and they'll want to study with you. I get a little obsessive with practice planning because my practice used to be completely nebulous and not very useful. So now every single Sunday, I sit down for 3 hours and I plan everything I'm going to practice and play for the rest of the week. And I practice in a pattern called Pomodoro. So it's a focus technique where you basically do 25 minutes off, 5 minutes off. Sorry, 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off until you hit 3 or 4. I find 3 works better for me. The official Pomodoro technique would be do 4 focus sessions. After 3 focus sessions, I take a 20-minute break, and then I can do another 3 focus sessions, 25, 5, 25, 5. Now, within those Pomodoros, I move on to something else every 5 minutes. Now, that seems insane, but here's what that does. If you only know you have 5 minutes to work on something, you're going to work on it because that timer is going to go off really quickly. I use an app called Seconds Pro. It's supposed to be used for exercise sessions, where you're moving from exercise to exercise in a timed manner. But I actually program in like my warm-up sessions, my practice sessions, and things like that. And I'm always moving to something else every 5 minutes. So I'll spend 5 minutes on an excerpt, 5 minutes on a solo, 5 minutes on an excerpt, and then maybe 5 minutes on a solo again. And what that does is it keeps me focused and it keeps me moving so that no time is wasted. And that's really the goal. No time is wasted. No time is spent daydreaming. Every single second, aside from your rest periods, is work. I set a timer for that break. During the break, I usually watch YouTube. But as soon as that timer goes off, it goes off and I get back to work. So it's really just all this needs to be timed. That's the key. Don't rely on looking at a clock because then you'll daydream and you'll spend 15 minutes on Facebook and you're like, oh, I thought it was just 5 minutes. Use the timer. That your phone is a great tool for this. What I do, I use that app called Seconds Pro for my sessions, and as soon as it sets in a timer, so that's the end of the session, I set a 5-minute timer on my Apple Watch or it could be your phone. It doesn't have to, but I set a 5-minute timer on my Apple Watch for that break, and then once that timer goes off, I'm back to work. People in this area have studios much larger than that. I have a friend who's at 90 this year. Some of the people who are like full-time, private teachers, who don't have any big performance aspirations or all, they're just like, I love doing this and I just want to private teach. 70, 80, 90 students is common. Dennis Houghton, actually, when he was a private teacher and he was raising his kids, he had 75 to 80 students every year. But yeah, I mean, when I had 60 people, that's not even a particularly large studio for a teacher down here. So basically what you end up doing is like you'll have like 3 bands meet in a row for at a high school. So you'll do like 6 students for those 3 bands, so 2 students per band period. And then you'll drive to the middle school and then the same thing will happen. And then you'll teach, for 4 students during their 2 bands or 6 students during their 2 bands. And then you'll go to a beginner class at the, intermediate school, and then you'll teach 2 there. And then you'll go to another school and then you'll teach 6 in a row there for their afternoon band, and just repeat 5, and then after school, you'll teach 6 or 7 students, in addition to the students you taught before school. And then you just do that times 5. Well, it would depend on what type of part-time job it is. Some part-time jobs, they need you to be, they need you to be there every day from 9 to 1, Monday through Friday. That's going to be hard to balance because then it's very hard to take off for auditions. It's very hard to take off to play in regional orchestras. It's very hard to do daytime rehearsals. Like, for example, like I'm playing with Fort Worth next week, the rehearsals are during the day. If I needed to be somewhere during the day, that wouldn't work. But if you have a part-time job where, shifts are flexible, or you get to do a lot of work at home, and just like, like one thing a lot of, that I think more people should do is like video editing. Because like if you do video editing, you get to work at home, at your own hours. So you can get in the work wherever you are. So something like that works a lot better. Some part-time jobs are not going to work super well, because it's just really, really stringent. From an employer's point of view, because, I employ people now who I need to be there, from, 10 to 6 every day. Like someone needs to be at the shop. Like, yeah, it's that kind of job is not super compatible with being a performer because it's hard to find, it's not easy to find people to cover you every time you're off.
Thank you, Dr. Wright.
Thank you for having me.